Yo, what is up, everybody? We're back with another edition of the Locals Only podcast. And if you've tuned in at all this week to the Locals Only Spotlight at 6:05 p.m., you have certainly heard our next artist, MaazKID. The single is called Vampire Love Song. Please welcome Steve. Steven, what are we going to use?
MaazKID's fine. We'll go with that.
MaazKID. All right.
Sure.
MaazKID and I met. I got to say it was probably around 2010-ish. You played bass in a band called Black Throat Wind that I lost my mind over. And to me, that was like a golden age of our local music scene. Between White Worlds, 100% one of my favorite releases of all time. And that's spanning like 3 decades of my involvement in the local music scene.
Thank you.
I have been a pain in your ass for the better part of a decade at this point. Urging you to get back into making music. And my resilience has paid off because here we are with MaazKID, a dope single, 4 songs that I've found on streaming services that I have fallen head over heels in love with. And from our conversations off camera, a bunch more in store.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks. I'm happy to be doing the podcast with you, Scott. And yeah, you have been bugging the crap out of me for the last few years to get back into the music stuff. But I definitely owe you that, and as well a worldwide pandemic. And certainly that was part of what ushered me back into wanting to create music again and kind of get my creative juices flowing. As for the name MaazKID, I've been going under that for just under the fact that this is my first venture out as a musician on my own. Apart from doing music with a band or with like 3 or 4 other guys and getting together and writing with them. So it's just me. So people in Syracuse definitely know me as Steve or Steven, and people can refer to me that. But for the music label, just go under MaazKID, and people can call me Maaz or MaazKID as well. But I'm definitely stoked to be doing music again and getting some stuff out there. And I really appreciate your support and everyone's support on this record that I'm putting out right now.
Dude, the feedback on Vampire Love Song has been pretty great. We're recording this Wednesday night, so I've had 3 days of getting it out on the air at 6:05 p.m. And, it can be a struggle to get feedback from an audience, right? Because a lot of times, like, especially with the way we use radio in 2022, it tends to be like a background thing. There's a less intended use of radio than there once was. But to get natural and organic feedback from listeners, and trust me, I've been in the business long enough to know when you have your family or your girlfriend or whatever call, trust me, I know, this isn't that. This is like actual like listeners that I engage with on a regular basis, either on our text line or via social media. They're hitting me up asking me, yo, what was in the Locals Only Spotlight this week? Like awesome. the 2 things that out of the 4 people that have reached out, 2 of them used the same 2 references. One I totally get. One struck me, and I went back and I was like, okay, I get based on their age why they would think that. Joy Division is pretty obvious for me. And man, who doesn't love Joy Division? And then the other one that they sprung forth that I didn't think about was She Wants Revenge. And that's a band that I haven't thought about in a really, really long time. So I went back and revisited it. And man, like I get it, because there's parts of it that I see where somebody in their mid to late 20s would go there in their mind.
Okay.
That was sort of like their beginning of this style of music.
Cool. I definitely I hear the Joy Division for sure. This is definitely like a synth heavy record. It's a pop record for sure. It also has elements of like drum machines and stuff like that. I definitely want the vibe to be upbeat and in parts kind of like something you play at the beach, and other stuff more like something you play while you're driving, just over the speed limit late at night on your way home or something like that. So I have to say I don't know the second band you referenced, but certainly the Joy Division reference, I definitely get that.
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, I hear all kinds of things in there, and I think because you and I are a couple generations apart as far as like age and like when we came to the scene, sure, and our experience with music, but like there's Joy Division in there for sure for me, right? But I also hear little elements of like what was a few years ago referred to as like a SoundCloud style, right?
Sure.
Where there's some 808s and maybe like a less polished version of like a Juice World, right?
Sure.
And I love that juxtaposition. There's artists
Sure.
out there like Garden and Pao Fu that are also doing something in the pocket that's not specific to what you're doing, but in the same
Sure.
ballpark, right?
Sure.
Like adjacent.
Yeah.
And I love knowing your history, right? The fact that like the majority of the shows that you and I have interacted at are scene adjacent to the hardcore scene, right? So to hear this music come out from you is just like, it's like this next level set of like genius thoughts for me, right? Because it's just
That's awesome. Thanks,
I'm
Scott.
so
That's
impressed
a
by
huge
it.
compliment. Thank you.
Like there's just I love when something isn't what I expect it to be.
Sure.
And with MaazKID, and you drop that first single, I was like, at first I was like, because you know how sometimes when you drop when you download things from like Dropbox and Google Drive and whatnot, like it downloads under like just like a number and not a name.
Sure.
I had done that with like 2 or 3 songs, and I was like, oh, I know what order I did these in. And I put it on, and I was like, okay, cool. I might have the wrong song. And I went back, and I obviously had the right song, and there was that light bulb moment, right? Like you remember from the Tom and Jerry cartoons where like
Sure.
you just light up. And for me, I was just like,
Oh, this is,
oh,
like, it's Steve. Yeah, exactly.
And for me, like, I know that like, it's not meant for people my age, but like, I love what music is doing in 2022. I like that genre walls are being broken down and that things aren't what they once were. I love that there are bands in the world, right? Because who doesn't love to go see like a standard 4-piece, 5-piece rock band with the singer and the guitar and the bass and the drums?
Of course.
But I think that like at some point we've got to let go of that being the standard.
Absolutely.
That, with the advent of what's happened over the last decade, we can even take it into the last 5 years, the artist is starting to come to the forefront again. I think that Adele was somebody that probably started that movement in the modern day. And then we end up in times like this with Billie Eilish, right? Like, and I think that you are very akin to that, right? Like, you mentioned Gen X, like, hey, I'm gonna go to the club. I'm gonna see this show. Like their idea of going to see live music is that standard. There's 4 or 5 guys on stage. Sometimes there's 6. You know what I mean? And it's gonna be like this loud thing. I love that your generation is bridging the gap. I love that like you're bringing 2022 to something that is, in my opinion, is storied and valuable to somebody who loves music like Joy Division.
Sure. So I, first started playing music when I was young. I was doing, my parents would send me to church and youth group, and I learned how to play bass then, drums, my brother with me as long. So we started playing together, and he started playing drums and I started playing bass. And that's kind of how I started rolling with music right off the bat. But sometime, I was always interested in hip hop music and rap. My brother and I would play basketball and like blast rap music as loud as we could. And we were in like Brewerton, like north of Syracuse, and like, a white neighborhood. And we just wanted to play the most aggressive thing that we could play. And, at that point, all we had was like Christian hip hop. And we would play that as loud as we could while we played basketball. So around that time, my grandfather gifted me a Casio keyboard, and I would sit in my basement and just play the demo, drums, and just noodle with the keys and stuff. And that always transferred over to my playing bass and bands with other people. And I know I'll speak for my brother on his behalf. I speak on him because we're doing something together called Electron Death, and he goes under the name Cyrus Dunbar. I go under the name MaazKID, and we're doing this thing together. We can talk about that more in a minute, but both of us had a lot of different influences from different places. One of my earlier influences specifically was 808s and Heartbreaks when Kanye West released that record. That was something to me, when I heard that record, I was telling myself, I'm not supposed to be really enjoying this. I can't play this in the car with my friends who listen to Converge or, Integrity or whatever. You know what I mean? How can I play this stuff? But that stuff was really sparking influence in me. I wanted to make music like that. So after Black Throat Wind broke up and, some time went by, especially after with the pandemic, I needed to start doing music again. And the only way I could do it was inside my own house. And I live in an apartment complex and I have a 5-year-old son. So I can't have 3 dudes over and we can't sit down and write loud music. While that's still a huge part of my life, and if I had the opportunity to do a band like that again, I certainly would. Right now, for me and what I'm trying to create, this is the role and the journey that I wanted to take with it. So that being said, influences, like you mentioned, to kind of bridge the gap here, Mike Dean is one of my number one influences, the synth god himself. He has written so many hip hop records, but started playing keys a long time ago. And so after kind of listening to his music, 420 and 421, and what he released, I was ready to sit down with a keyboard and try to get as many sounds as I could, including drum machines and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, and in 2022, I mean, essentially, like a lot of records that I think people don't realize are being recorded in people's bedrooms.
Sure.
Right? Like, and there's a whole genre built around that called
bedroom. That's kind of the SoundCloud thing, yeah, and now the bedroom pop thing, yeah, it's the same thing. So I definitely, to something you said earlier, I wanted to write a record that translated to a generation below me and also to 2 or 3 generations ahead of me. And actually, a lot of I don't, I'm not out trying to actually I am. I wouldn't say that. I'm trying to get everyone to listen to this record. But the first few people I told, all of them were over the age of 50 or 60. It's like, hey, listen to my record. You're going to like it. Get on your Peloton, work out to this. There's a couple songs on there that have house beats that you could, jog to or play volleyball on the beach to. And then some other ones are a little more like aggressive and have like that trap sound, that hip hop sound behind it with the hi-hats and the drum machines. So it definitely crosses genres. I wanted to bend genres. I didn't want to do something that was going to be like, oh, it's the guy from Black Throat Wind or Steve, the hardcore kid. I wanted to show that I had a lot of other influence, from The Weeknd to Travis Scott to the Foo Fighters and other things like that, things that drive and are heavy as well. So
absolutely. Let's talk about Drew for a second. Your brother
Sure.
Drew was in another phenomenal band from around the same era of Black Throat Wind called Oak and Bone. Vastly different than Black Throat Wind, more akin to the bands like Converge or Disembodied or any of the other sort of late 2000s underground hardcore adjacent metal bands.
Yeah, we were definitely influenced by a lot of the other local bands from Syracuse. So I would throw out Ed Gein and Engineer, Blood Sun Circle, those dudes. Those guys were all just a few years older than us. When we started playing music, we were watching those guys open for other bands. And I remember I think there was an Engineer show with Cave In. That might have been what it is. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But that was one of the times I was like, oh, and those guys, shout out to Gorham Brothers and those guys keeping the scene alive with their music in Syracuse and their music store.
And catching shoplifters on video.
Yeah, get those guys. Who robs a local music store?
Right.
Come on.
So Drew is also sort of in this space with you, adjacent to MaazKID. There's another project coming. Before we move into that, I just want to say this publicly because I've said it a bunch of times. I don't know that I've ever said it in a recorded session with anybody. My favorite musical moment of the last 12 years was the Black Throat Wind show at the Lost where Drew sat in.
Oh, yeah. That was awesome.
The backing vocals, I remember that. The percussion that went along with it. It was literally a moment that will forever be burned into my mind. Like that is like, if there was ever a moment, like if I was putting together a highlight reel of the 30 years of what I've done, like as far as producing shows and everything else, that would either be the opening scene or the closing scene.
I take that as a huge compliment. Either way, completely epic. I definitely remember that show. I think I've blocked it out a bit because I believe the bass I was using that night was my roommate's. It wasn't even it was a complete knockoff, and it was terrible. So I might have blocked it out, but I remember that show. I remember Drew joining in. One of my favorite shows with Black Throat Wind was the Explosions in the Sky show. That had been one of my favorite shows of all time. We played so well that night, and I played in front of probably the most people I've ever played in front of. And between Black Throat Wind and shows with Drew and Oak and Bone, I wasn't in Oak and Bone, but plenty of stories with those guys. We definitely had a lot of fun for sure.
Very cool. Well, that's sort of the encapsulation of my history with the Fitzgerald brothers. Now let's talk about the future.
Okay, definitely.
You mentioned Electron Death, which is something that you're collaborating with Drew on, or is that his own standalone thing, a la MaazKID?
No, so MaazKID and Drew goes under the name Cyrus Dunbar. That's his production name. Both of us have, for the last at least 2 years now, 2.5, 3 years, have been producing music. We have a lot of music backed up. We have a couple albums on SoundCloud, just because that seems to be the easiest way to put up stuff without going through a distributor. We like to put up demos there, and also completed albums. There's a couple there. So we just released 2 albums under the name Electron Death. They are kind of like alternative electronica. They don't really span to any specific genres. They can get heavy in some parts, a little dancey in other parts. Certainly kind of blended there together. I produced an entire record called One Earth, and Drew produced a record called Two Breathing. And those will be released on Spotify and all streaming platforms probably by the end of the summer. We're still kind of working out some last minute kinks and what we want it to look like. But those albums in their format now are on SoundCloud. So if anyone has a SoundCloud link or wants to look it up, you can go to Electron Death. It's just soundcloud.com/electron-death. Electron Death also is a kind of a brainchild for a production company. I do a little comedy on the side, so it's going to also include, hopefully in the future, YouTube channels and other stuff that we want to produce together, and also with other businesses or companies. So there's an Electron Death as production, like an umbrella name, the 2 of us together. And then also that spans into the band Electron Death, the 2 of us together producing. And then both of us separate, MaazKID and Cyrus Dunbar. But we are also, we're working on a new record for that now. So that'll be probably like a 3rd and 4th record under Electron Death. So there's going to be a lot of music under the name Electron Death that comes out between the 2 of us. I'm in the midst of working on a hip hop mixtape with a couple different local rappers and local artists, local producers. Drew's with me on that as well. So yeah, it's gonna be pretty cool.
Dig it, man. It seems like you've got your hands full, but I know
Definitely.
that the last couple of years have. Listen, man, I'm at a point in my life where I need to put a positive spin on everything that I can, right? Because with social media and every other outlet that people have, it seems like a never-ending stream of negativity, right? So like,
Absolutely.
I've done this a couple of times on a couple of different platforms, but like, I think that the upside of the pandemic is twofold. One, a lot of us, myself included, worked so much that I never got to be at home, right? Like I worked, for the first 8 years that I was at this radio station, I worked full-time during the day. And then at least 4, if not 6 or 7 nights a week, I would go work another full-time job at the Lost Horizon, right? You had to hustle. The first 8 years I was with my wife, I saw her for maybe 12 hours a week. And then the pandemic hit. I actually got to understand what it was like to be at home. You know what I mean? Like it was it was eye-opening. So for me, like it changed my life. Like still have a lot of love and respect for the Lost Horizon and its history and the things that we've all done there. But that's something that, if we're being completely honest, doesn't rate as high on my priorities list as the life I've been able to create the last 2 years at home with my wife and our pets in our home.
Of course. I think that's a huge thing for a lot of people. And that's what this record is really, for me, the MaazKID record Lessons that just came out is all about. It's about taking, we get to this point in our lives where we think that we have it kind of like settled or figured out, or maybe we feel like we don't have it figured out, or things aren't quite the way we think they're going to be, or whatever. But in the long run, we need to step back and look at what's important. And that's our families, our loved ones, our friends, because all of this is short and fleeting. And it's really, I think, creating and being positive is, you can ask anyone that I work with in my side job. Shout out Possibilities, downtown Syracuse. Get the best pasta in the world if you're in Syracuse. I walk around constantly shouting, well, not shouting, but my motto is positive energy. And I live that. And that's what this, record's all about. It took a low point in my life. I was really at a pretty low point around the time in 2020 that the pandemic hit. And through some really fortunate circumstances, I was able to kind of pick myself up and get a couple keyboards and sit down and write this record. And since then, I've felt inspired through that positive outlet to keep going. And I think a lot of people need that. They need to take a step back from that hustle culture, from that like grind culture. And even this record, I felt like I had to push myself to get it done or make it sound a certain way. And the days that I said to myself, you know what, I'm going to spend the day at the park with my kid, or I'm going to cook a steak for my girlfriend instead. The next day, I would pour myself into it. So those periods of rest that artists or anyone at any place in their life, those are important things that I think people really need to take care of. And that's what lessens the title track and what the title of the whole album is all about. So wrap it right into that.
Very cool. Well, leading to my second part of that twofold, you just explained very well, and from a first person perspective, because I've only really been able to sort of equate it with the things that I've gotten into. But I'm not, like I've fronted a million bands, but like I'm no musician, right? Like the way we grow up, like no offense to hardcore singers, you know what I mean? Or dudes like,
and I was one,
Roca, you know what I mean? Like all it really takes is training your voice to be abused for the most part. I mean, there are some phenomenal people out there and there is an art to it for sure. But a lot of us that have been in bands over the years aren't what you would call singers, right? So like,
sure.
But I have had an opportunity to talk to a wide array of artists, whether it's Dan from Imagine Dragons or Oliver Tree or upstarts like the young people in Cannons, or the Maine was in the studio. Everybody has the same opinion, is now that I don't want to say we're past the pandemic, but we're past the worst part of the pandemic. I've sort of laid it out there like, like the pandemic did have an upside because y'all got to sit home for 2 years and write and break the cycle. Because in that world, there's a very definitive cycle. It's write, record, tour, write, record, tour. And then
Sure.
in there's press and all of these other things that you have to do. And you see in some artists how that breaks them down. The amount of music that's coming out into the world now, based off of the fact that nobody toured for 2 years, everybody got to woodshed and make demos and store ideas and reignite the spark that is their artistry. I think we're in for it the next couple of years, right? Like the amount of stuff that's already out, and then I'm seeing upstart things like yours and little bands like the Kiwis from Syracuse that really kind of only happened because of the pandemic. Like to me, like it makes me more passionate to do the things I do, seeing that other people are inspired to create. Like I've always sort of just considered myself like the conduit between an audience and the artist, right? Now I just have a much larger amplifier with the radio station. So it's cool for me to see so many of you guys, especially your sort of era of our music scene.
I think I tweeted about that and like maybe March of 2020 or April. I can't remember. Like, why would I know my tweets? But either way, I definitely said, "Oh, pandemic, everything shut down. Who wants to start a punk band? Like now's the time." And then I kind of just started a punk band with myself. You know what I mean? Right. I needed all the elements, and I needed to do with what I had. So that's definitely. I think a lot of people are going to go that route. And for me, the first year of the pandemic, from 2020 to 2021, it was like, what am I going to do? I feel totally and utterly stifled. And then around 2021, when it wasn't really getting any better and we weren't really feeling, we were feeling okay, but it was just like, this is going to hang in for quite a long time. It was like, all right, it's time to buckle down and make some music. And I'm really excited because I think a lot of people, like you said, to touch kind of something on what you said earlier in our talk, Syracuse has had, like the hardcore heyday. And I'm still down for a blossoming and blooming hardcore scene. I'm not knocking that at all. Like that definitely needs to happen. I'm glad it's happening right now. I'm not going to stumble over some bands' names, but shout out Lucas Reed, Syracuse Shows. I think that it's time, because there hasn't been for so long. I mean, there's always been something happening in Syracuse, but to kind of pinpoint it, what's also influenced me, like the way that Griselda and West Side Gun and Benny the Butcher, Conway the Machine have put their hip hop, their music on the map and consequentially putting Buffalo on the map. I mean, that's what needs to happen in Syracuse. I'd like to say it's me, but I'd like to see it happen with anybody. Someone who's not in Atlanta saying, "Oh, I'm from the Cuse, but I'm a rapper from Atlanta." Like, that's great. I'm stoked that, you know, those guys would be putting Syracuse on the map like that. But let's have something with roots here that's been here for a while, that needs to show that, you know, Syracuse at one point for 6, 7, 8 months out of the year feels like you're trapped in a cold city. And for the rest of it, it feels like you have the freedom to do anything, because in the summertime, you can go biking to the beach, and then, you know, whatever else you want to do. I don't know. Syracuse is a great place, and it's gotten crapped on for quite a bit. I don't know if I can say the S word. I wouldn't say the C word, but I don't know if it's going to go on the FCC or not. But either way,
this won't be on the air. We just we air on the side.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Syracuse has gotten shit on so much that I think it's time for us to really turn around and say Syracuse has a lot of potential. And I think people get to the point in their lives where, and this is where I want to take Electron Death and MaazKID, is also to a place where I can encourage other artists to continue to be themselves and approach the things they want to do. I got Dave from Onaka. Right now he's doing like these sick charcoal paintings on like cardboard, and it's like, dude, just keep doing that. Whatever makes you move, whatever makes you feel good or makes you get that outlet out, people need it. And I want to encourage people to keep pushing for that, and to also take it to whatever level the first level you don't think you can succeed at, take it to that level, because that's the first level you should be taking it to. Syracuse is a great city. We got a lot of opportunities on the horizon. I want to see the music scene, no matter what kind of music it is, no matter what age it is, blow up. It needs to.
Absolutely. Well, I will end it there. Once again, MaazKID in the locals only spotlight. You'll be able to catch it later today at 6:05 p.m., Friday at 6:05 p.m., and then probably for at least another month or two on locals only 11 p.m. Sunday nights.
Can I get a couple of quick shout outs in before we close out?
Do it.
Shout out Vanilla Dolomite, producer out of New Jersey. Slackjaw, he's a rapper with us. Obviously Cyrus Dunbar. Shout out to Rue and Kid Called Danger. If you guys haven't heard of Kid Called Danger yet, it's an awesome 4-piece band with a hip hop MC. They are always playing in Syracuse. Check those dudes out. I think that's everybody. I just wanted to make sure I get all my boys' names out there. I appreciate you, Scott. You're doing a great job, man. I
appreciate you. I'm so happy that you're back. Thanks, you're on the scene, and color me impressed, sir. I can't wait to see what comes next. If it's not weird for you because you're brothers, give Drew a big fat kiss on the mouth from me.
You know what? I'll do it. I'll do it for you, Scott. Right on the lips.
Next week, right here, Locals Only podcast. I've got to check my paperwork because I am a bad record keeper. Let's see. Next week, bear with me. This will be the funny part. Oh, all right. Next week, to celebrate his birthday on 420, we are going to sit and chat with a gentleman that we actually talked about a little bit ago, Mr. Dave Sachs.
Oh, really?
On the Burning River.
That's amazing. What a segue. I'm so glad I brought him up.
I love it.
Happy 420, everybody.
Infinitely proud of you. Can't wait to see what comes next. Check out MaazKID everywhere music is available, and Electron Death as well. I'll put links below this on social media, and if you're watching this on YouTube, they're right below. Thanks again, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Scott. I really appreciate it, man.
This again is the Locals Only podcast for 95X.